Hey everybody and welcome back. Today we're going to be revisiting our lineup optimizer that we created about 2 months ago for the purpose of using in daily fantasy sports. There's been a lot of discussion in the comment section on that video, for which I'm very grateful for. Thank you guys for letting me know your thoughts and different things you would like to see building out from that. And directly coming from those comments is the topic of the video today. So we're going to be revisiting and making a couple of quality of life improvements, mainly focused on how we can interact with the output of the optimizer. So we're not changing anything about the optimizer itself. What we are going to be changing is how the lineups get outputted and how we can easily actually view those lineups. So let me pull up as an example what we had last time. So this was our input, as you can see. I'm going to be this is the standard download you get from FanDuel. I'd imagine DraftKings is something similar, where you'll have an ID number, which is how they keep everything sorted on the back end. And then you have obviously the player name, their position, fantasy points per game, salary, so on and so forth. So if we just go to that directory location, so if we zoom in here, you can see it's not quite a direct match. We've got, because ideally we need the IDs in this exact format, and we'd probably like to look at the names too to actually look at the lineups and just kind of truth check ourselves, get some ground truthing going on with your knowledge of what you think the lineup should be, and make sure you're not randomly pulling in a Carson Edwards for Boston, who best case scenario is going to play 5 minutes and hit 2 threes. Like, that's not, I don't care how low the ownership projections are for him. That's not somebody you want to pick up outside of a very specific circumstance, in which case there are probably lots of injuries. So first off, we need to output this ID number instead of this combination of the position and the ID number. And then we'll need to swap out that underscore for a hyphen. And we'll want another copy that's going to substitute out the ID number for the nickname of the player. So that's basically just what we're going to be looking for. And then if we want to get more specific, we would reorganize the columns themselves. So we'd have the point guards first, shooting guards, because that's going to be the order it goes in for FanDuel. But anyways, back to our code. Give you an idea where we're going with it. So this is our last iteration of the lineup optimizer, where we bring in everything, we define our variables, our parameters, we tell it what we want, and then we save it to an Excel workbook. So one of the big differences we're going to have with this quality of life improvement is we don't need openpyxl anymore, because we are not opening up an Excel workbook. You still could if you wanted, but you can export straight from Pandas to Excel, and we're going to stay in Pandas. All right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy and paste this down here, and we're just going to step through and make some changes. So this is fine. Players, we're reading in the CSV still. We're going to use that same day, that same slate, August 7th, just because we've used it before. It works fine. We don't need the team necessarily, because we're not tracking team right now. That is something you might want to do in the future, because again, I think you can only have up to 4 players per team. Yeah. Yep, 4 players per team. So if it's a small slate, there's only 2 games, there's only 4 teams, you might want to start tracking that. But we're going to pull in nickname next, all right? Because nickname is what we're interested in. And then I'm just going to comment these out. You can delete them if you'd like. You don't need them at all. You can delete them. So, what's up next? Well, obviously, we need to take team out of there. But we don't need nickname down here, because this is just to run the optimization itself. We don't need the players' names. We just need the ID. Teams we're not going to need. Let's see. This looks good. We're going to go ahead and define an empty dictionary here for our lineups dictionary. And just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're looking at, this workflow is going to be the exact same as far as creating our lineups. But when we get down here and we start writing them in cell by cell, moving a column over, writing into the new cell, moving another column, writing it in, instead, we're just going to create a dictionary that's going to look like this. It's going to look like lineup 1 is going to be the key. And the value of that lineup is going to be a list. It's going to be center, point guard 1, point guard 2, etc. for the rest of the team. And then we can put that into Pandas. And I believe we're going to have to transpose it just the way Pandas reads in dictionaries, a dictionary of lists. So for each lineup we have, that's going to be one record here. And then we can just throw that up into Pandas and go from there. Just to give you an idea of why we're creating an empty dictionary there to update with. So we have an empty dictionary. And this is all fine again, because we're not really changing any of the logic. You know, we're still doing the exact same function for the lineup optimization. We're tracking salary points. Salary cap stays the same. Don't need anything about position constraints right now. We're good, we're good. I think that might need to be marked in one. Anyways. Let's see, if not lineup equals 1, prob plus equals prob dot solve. All right, so back to updating. We don't need to track the column number because we're not writing it into Excel. And that was the only reason that was there, was to start in column 1. For each lineup, we start in column 1, and as we go through each variable, we go down the list, and then we drop back for the next lineup, start in column 1 again. So let's go ahead and comment out everything having to do with Excel or worksheets and cells. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take right here, lineup list. We're going to define an empty list. And then we're just going to go in here and say if the variable value does not equal 0, we're going to lineup list.append v.name. Okay. And that's going to be dropping in that C underscore ID number that we were looking at just a minute ago. And then when we get down to here, and we'll go ahead and print the lineup and the total score so you can see it iterating to show that it works. But then all we have to do, make sure that is, yep, lineups underscore dict. But then all we have to do is lineups underscore dict dot update. And that's going to be lineup, semicolon, lineup list. So what that's going to do is, because remember, we're in a for loop. We don't want, we'll do 15. We don't need 151 lineup, 150 lineups. So remember, we're in this for loop for the lineups. And again, if you're not familiar with this specific set of code here, please go watch the first video where we created this. I type the entire thing up in the video. You can watch it get made, and I explain it as I go. So within each lineup that we're making, we're creating a dictionary like I mentioned before down here, where the lineup number is the key, and then we'd plop in a list that just contains the players that were selected for that lineup. And I believe that's all we need to do, or all we need to update. Well, I guess we'll throw in the total score too, since we had that in the previous one. Let's do this. Lineup list dot append. This will just put the total score for that lineup at the end of the list. So we'll have it in the same format as we had it in the Excel output before. Let's try that. No, yeah, I've got to run this one first. Up list. I missed a capitalization somewhere. Lineup list, lineup list, lineup list. Well, there it is. All right, so as you can see, we start out lineup 1 at 324.5 points. 322, 19, 318, 317. So let's take a look at that lineups dict. All right, so we've got it working. So as you can see again, we have our lineup number and then the lineup itself with the total score at the end. So center, power forwards, point guards, small forwards, shooting guards. So what we can do now is just take that and drop it into Pandas. Capital F, it is Dataframe, lineups, dict. All right, so now, you remember from our Pandas video, we'll check the head of that and we'll see, okay, so that works, but it's kind of flip-flop from what we want. At least for me, it makes more sense to have the lineup numbers being down for each row, and then your lineup going across rather than, you know, the first row being all the centers. So for that, we're going to do df equals df.t. And what that's going to do is it's a transpose function. And it basically just switches the x and the y, rows and columns, just flips them. So as you can see here, we had all the centers going across a row. Now we have lineup 1 going across the row all the way over to there. So to make it a little bit easier to read, we're going to go ahead and change the column names. Yeah, so we don't need the head still there. We'll just define a list variable, new columns, and it's point guard center. We'll do pf1, pf2, 1, pg2, small forward 1, 2. Guard 1, guard 2. And, can't forget, total score. All right, so we've defined what the column names we want to be. And now we just need to df.columns equals new calls. Now let's check df.head again, see what it looks like. There we go. So now we have, let's make sure we had them in the right order. Power forward, point guard, small forward, shooting guard, total score. Cool. It worked. Now, so now we've got all of our lineups here, and we didn't have to go out to Excel and then go find it and open it and look at it. So we can just keep it right here in Pandas. We don't have to go anywhere with it. We don't have to go anywhere else to look at it, to analyze it, to do anything. So what's up next is going to be getting rid of the positional marker in the underscore on all of these, and then swapping out the middle underscore with a hyphen so we can match, if you recall, this format, which is just the ID number, no positions, and hyphens, not underscores. So to do that, we're going to need to iterate over every cell in this data frame and pull out those values and just make them disappear. So to do that, we are going to use for loop, and I'm sure that there is a more efficient way to do this in Pandas, because Pandas has tons of functions that are predefined that iterate over rows, columns, cells, etc., and you can map functions over the whole thing. But I'm just going to, for the sake of visibility, we're going to create a new data frame called df2 and make it equal to df. So if we look at df2, it's the same thing. So we've just created a new data frame to work off of, And that's going to keep our initial data frame, keep the integrity there so I don't lose it in case I mess up on this. Then we always have something to come back to, right? So we are going to define a list of positions. And that is going to be basically our column names. So I'm actually just going to come up here and copy and paste this without total score, because we don't need to do anything to total score, right? Because it's just a number. It's fine. We have positions, and for each position, we are going to have a key we want to remove, or remove items, remove string, whatever you want to call it. We're just going to basically define what we're looking to take away. If I could type, that would help. PG SG. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So that's all of our positions that we're needing to take away from. And then for that, we're going to want to loop through each column in here. So for pos in positions. And then within each column, instead of having to write like, all right, well, now we want to look at the center column and we want to remove this, and then power forward 1, and then power forward 2, point guard 1, point guard 2, like that would take a lot. So we're going to write one nested for loop that's going to look at each of them. We're going to do for remove key and remove keys. So what that means is we're going to look at each of these for each of these. And you might be thinking that's inefficient because there's only one of them in each column, but we're going to look for all of them. And that's true. But my processor is able to run a lot faster than my fingers are to type. So it's a little bit inefficient in the actual performance of the function, but it's much more efficient typing-wise. And I am the weak link here, not the computer, or a data set of this size at least. So we're just going to take df2 pause, and again, that's going to be referring to this column. So if I take df2 and I plug in that, that's just going to give me that center column, right? So that's all I'm doing there is calling in that column specifically. And I want it to now equal df2. My goodness. Pause. Dot string. Dot replace. All right. So what this logic is I'm going through and I'm taking each column and I'm looking for this value, which is each of these, and I'm replacing it with just an empty string, which is nothing. So it's basically just removing it from that string. So let's see if that works. First off, all right, that seems to work. We no longer have the positional argument at the front here, and we can just compare easily right up here. So that's worked. Okay. Now we also need to, not within that for loop, but yes in the for loop for each column. So we're going to come back out even with the for the remove keys. And now we're only going to do whatever we type next one time for each column. And that's just going to be df2 pause equals df2 pause dot string dot replace. And now instead of doing the remove key, we're just going to do the underscore and replace it with a hyphen. So with that, that's going to be a very similar function to what we just ran here. We're just going to pick out the underscore that's left and replace it with a hyphen is all. So we'll run that, check it again, and there we go. Now we have our IDs. Wonderful. So, and then we can reorganize it. df2 EG1, EG2, SG1, 2, 1, SF2, power forward 1, power forward 2, center. And then we can recreate a new data frame that's in the right order that we can put up to FanDuel. Because again, it's going to have to be point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. That's how it gets uploaded. That's going to have to save you the trouble of going through and like picking each one individually and moving into the right column when you move it over. Not a big deal, but again, small quality of life things matter. All right, so now that we have that, really the only thing left to do... Oh, sorry, we missed total score. My apologies. That capital. Total score. There. Now we have total score too. Now we can still see what they scored. Okay. So the only thing left we need to do here is to swap out these ID numbers for the names so we can take a look at them and just kind of verify them without having to move into Excel and create a VLOOKUP function to go back to the other spreadsheet and pull them over. That's a pain. Nobody wants to do that. It's going to be pretty simple. And we can actually implement it way back up here. So since we brought in the nickname function there, all we have to do is we're going to define another dictionary, player name dict. We're going to have that be this code right here. Dict zip players. And I want ID. And I'll explain this in just a moment. Players. Okay, so what this is doing is creating a dictionary where the player ID based on this data frame here, it's going to get the ID as the key and the player nickname as the value. So let me just take this so we don't have to rerun this entire thing, because remember, the player's data frame is still defined. I don't have to run this in here. So we're going to go ahead and bring it out and run it down here to check it real quick. Now let's take a look. And sure enough, we have the IDs and we have their names. So how do we get that into a new data frame? It is really quite simple. It's going to be this. We're going to create a new data frame, just df player name equals df3. Was our most recent one. And then we're going to take for pos and positions because we still have the same columns we want to loop through and everything. We're just going to do df player name pos equals df3. Nope. We still want df player name. Pause. And then Pandas has a very nice simple replace function. And that is going to allow us to feed a dictionary straight in there. Wait, let me player name dict. So what that allows us to do is feed a dictionary straight into that function without defining anything else. And it's going to automatically recognize that and start swapping out these keys for those values. So if we run that and then look at dfplayerName.head, now we have all of the names of the players rather than their IDs. Let's go ahead and look at all of them. I'd rather have them all on 1, 2, 50. Okay. So you're probably going to notice something here, and that is where Kemba Walker and Kyle Lowry are every single one, every single lineup. Drew Holiday's every single lineup. Fred VanVleet is every lineup but one. Pascal Siakam is in all but one lineup. Right, Brandon Ingram's in almost every lineup. So these are all incredibly similar lineups. So while we've solved all of our, quality of life, but keep in mind this. Think of some ways you might be able to handle that or deal with that beforehand, because that is where we're going for our next video. But more importantly, taking whatever metrics you're looking at in your personal expertise and being able to influence who gets picked where, that's what we'll be going over next. So stay tuned. Make sure and subscribe so you can get that information, as well as the big announcement coming on where you'll be able to find the actual code and not have to just type along with me. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks.